The original work of Su Qing's autobiographical novel 10 Years of Marriage Chapter 11 beginning when I was training. I only felt troubled. After I left, I felt confused again. Everything at home is still as usual. Even neighbors or relatives who come here often ask, "How is it? Isn't the new young lady going to teach today?" I just shook my head and smiled bitterly. And it was hard to tell them that my parents-in-law had listened to my sister-in-law's slander. I thought about the mixed gender and didn't want me to teach. It was hard to tell them how the school was not decent, and I didn't want to go there and suffer every day. I was living at home, and Luoyang's mother said to me, "I'd better hug Chekuchu more often. Women are always responsible for taking care of the house and raising children, and it's useless even if they come back from abroad." I was silent and speechless. I just felt that I was too reluctant to take on the responsibility. It was not my turn to look after the house, and I was not the master of raising the children. One day, I quietly wrote a letter to my mother, telling her how much I missed her and how I longed to live with her again. She immediately sent a conversant girl, Lin Ma, to come and told my mother-in-law that the Dragon Boat Festival was coming, and she thought it would be better to pick me up to celebrate the summer. It turns out that according to the old school rules of N City, in the 3 years after her marriage, her daughter is always taken back to her bride's family to spend the summer. I don't know the reason. Maybe it's because summer is prone to problems. Newlyweds tend to be more friendly, so it's not good to live together. As for the future, in the future, often when we have more children, we can no longer live without each other, so we have to give up. In the first summer after I got married, my mother couldn't come to pick me up because I had a tummy, so she didn't come to pick me up. This time I got my letter, so I said this. My mother-in-law went into the room to discuss with her father-in-law for a while, and after a while she came out and said to Motherlin, "I'm sure it's like this. It won't be too late to go back after your family group has had rice soup on the Dragon Boat Festival. Come and get back to my mother-in-law. Is that okay?" Of course Lin's mother said yes, so she agreed that she would still hire a cart to pick her up that afternoon. So the mother-in-law left Motherlin to have some snacks. After she finished eating, Motherlin said, "Can my grandson also ask the wet nurse to live with her for a few days?" The mother-in-law pondered for a long time and said, "Grandma should go with her. Look, it's just that the child's house will be noisy, so let her come back after spending the night." When Motherlin heard this, she happily reported to her mother, "I could barely sleep that night. I counted on my fingers and realized that there were still 4 days left before the Dragon Boat Festival. It was such a long day. Mother shouldn't worry about Motherlin mentioning the Dragon Boat Festival. If it's definitely going to be the Dragon Boat Festival, just say a few days late, so as not to make people wait. I'm most afraid of waiting. I just go when I say I want to go. Beginning of summer or Dragon Boat Festival." However, they insist on taking care of it. My mother-in-law discussed it with her father-in-law the next day. This is the first time for Huiqing to go back to her parents' home for the summer, and it's the first time for Chechu to see her grandma, so we need to give her a more decent Christmas gift. The father-in-law said, "Songzi is the most important thing. You should quickly pick up the good glutinous rice and soak it tomorrow. You should also pick up the clean rice dumplings. I will buy them later." After hearing this, Shangying swallowed her saliva first, grinning, and asked her parents repeatedly, "How many animals do we have in our preparations? Can we have more?" I thought to myself, there will be no shortage of slanderous girls like you. You will lose if you don't give it, and you will curse the old lady who can't steal it. So everyone decided that there was nothing else to say but to do it with all their energy. Early the next morning, I asked Luoyang's mother to pour water, but she didn't answer. I ran downstairs and saw the nurse powdering Cheku. I asked, "Where is Luoyang's mother?" The wet nurse said, "She got up early in the morning and went to the river to buy rice dumplings. She wanted 8 buckets of rice dumplings. My wife had taken care of them last night." I had nothing to say, so I scooped water and washed my face. After breakfast on the 3rd day, everyone got started. My mother-in-law asked me to wipe the leaves, which were also soaked in water. First, take them out of the water, put them on a stone bench and smooth them straight, including the narrow and broken ones. Discard. I handed the straight and intact brown leaves to my mother-in-law, and Lao Huang's mother one by one, thinking about what it would be like when I go back tomorrow, and I couldn't help but smile on my face. But then I looked so happy when I thought about going back to my parents' home. Didn't you ask your mother-in-law to look at Hanshin? No matter what, I had no choice but to tighten my face. Xingying's face also tensed up because her mother-in-law didn't agree to her request to make rice dumplings. My mother-in-law said that the rice dumplings she had in her were like big rice balls without any sharp corners. Wouldn't it make the grandma laugh when she gave them out? I said to my mother-in-law, "You will eat it anyway. So what does it matter if it looks worse?" The mother-in-law replied, "You don't know this. The most important thing about the rice dumpling is the horn, which is long and pointed at the top, and the three corners below are supported by it. It looks so beautiful clustered one by one on the plate." It is said that Zhang Xianzhang went to Shaojiao Mountain and picked the smallest golden lotus with pointed wings and placed it on it to make a necklace. In order to choose the top rice dumpling on Dragon Boat Festival, my mother-in-law went to great lengths to range all the rice dumplings on for large immortal tables. She looked at them again and again, and finally had to let my father-in-law decide whether this one was higher than her peers. Can Dingzong really be the best? Our ordinary eyes can't tell the difference, but since it was the father-in-law who picked it, no one dared to object. If the head of the family picks the top one, is there anything wrong? At noon, we made rice dumplings. Everyone ate in a hurry and packed up the 8-color festival gifts. However, the mother-in-law was still worried about the rice dumplings and asked the people carrying the burden to walk more steadily and not to let the piles of rice dumplings fall down one after another. In case, my mother-in-law warned again and again, if a few roll down, you must carefully pack them on the road. Secretly, this rice dumpling with the corners wrapped in red velvet is placed on top. Make no mistake, the burden bearers set off, and Mother Lin came to pick us up with 2 empty trucks. I was wearing a light red silk thin jacket that day, with flowers embroidered on the collar, cuffs, and chest. The coat was a light gray short coat, and a colorful flower handkerchief was inserted in the left pocket. Half exposed like a variegated cockscomb, clusters were coming to get it, but I quickly got out of the way. She was also dressed up today, a brand new outfit made of golden soft satin, with buttons on the back and embroidered with a picture of a crane holding beads in its mouth. Each one flies in a different posture, and its feathers are white. The tips of the wings, the tip of the beak, and the top of the tail are all black, and the paws look like a dark gray that cannot be seen clearly. Her grandmother said, on Dragon Boat Festival, Chaku should still wear tiger shoes, as long as she chooses a new pair. She has been wearing gold locks and silver necklaces for a long time, and she has been tied with colorful silk threads and strung with an almanac, saying that they are suppressive and can ward off evil spirits. The clustered hat was decorated with 10 hollow golden R hats in a semicircle on the front, but her grandmother was still worried. Last night, she suddenly and whimsically embellished another golden R hat on the top of the hat. She only told her wet nurse to go all the way. Be careful not to lose it. After finishing dressing up, Chaku opened her little mouth and just nibbled on her fist. On her wrist was a pair of exquisite bell pots, also made of gold, with 3 bells on each pot, and a ring of colorful rings tied around her right wrist. Luozi was taught to her by Lao Huang's mother during the beginning of summer festival. She said that if she put the beginning of summer rope on her wrist, she would not suffer from heat stroke even if it gets hotter this year. Chachuchu gained weight very quickly, and now the rope loops were completely embedded in the tender meat. It felt really painful for me to look at it, but I had nothing to say. Finally, they put a large piece of ink on the tip of her nose. This was also the old rule. The first time she went to Grandma's house, she should have a black nose. So I went upstairs and locked the door, and took out one for sale. It was full of shirts, pants, socks, handkerchiefs, etc. And there were also a few cheongsams, because I was going to live in Jiali. In addition, I have a lot of things to bring, but I just can't fit them all in the bag. And I can't add another box or a basket to make it look like I've moved everything back to my parents' house. I asked the wet nurse to come up and carry the basket downstairs. As I walked into my mother-in-law's room, I asked her to come in and handed her my room key and jewelry box. I only had a rose ruby ring on my hand, a wedding diamond ring, a watch on the left side of my wrist, and a gold key with just a thin strand of flowers. My mother-in-law hid the things and walked downstairs with me. When we got downstairs, my mother-in-law asked Lao Huang's mother to take us to the car. Then she pointed to a large basket of things and said, "This is a bag of buns for grandma. There are also other foods. You can give them to your neighbors and relatives." I responded, and Mother Lin thanked her profusely and said that she didn't dare to accept it. But the old man Huang Ma has already picked up the basket and left. My nanny Lin and I shared 3 cars. I was in the front, Nanny and Chaku were in the middle, and Nanny Lin was at the back with her things. Along the way, I looked back at Chukyo. She seemed to be extremely happy, dancing and shouting for joy. And I was also so happy that I felt lightheaded. After finally arriving at the door, my mother was already waiting anxiously. I walked in and shouted, "Mom?" My mother came out and asked, "Is Chaka here too?" But Chaka was afraid of strangers. She was afraid that Grandma would hug her, so she held her wet nurse's head and neck tightly. My mother asked Motherland to go out and pay for the car. She asked us to go sit in the room and told me that the person who gave the gift had just gone back. Why should your mother-in-law be so polite? The rice dumplings were really good, but there were too many, which made me feel really bad. After hearing this, I suddenly felt a chill in my heart. Why was even my mother being polite to me? Did she regard me as an outsider? Then I thought that maybe she was telling the nanny, hoping that she would pass it on to my mother-in-law when she goes back tomorrow. So I went on to say something. "My mother-in-law is thinking about you very much and asked me to wait for you." The whole basket was presented. The mother opened the plate and saw that there were 2 packets of baodu inside, one containing lotus seeds and rock sugar, and one containing huo jingya and mince cake. There is also a large order of wiguang cakes, about 100 guangjing, which is a great gift from the people of N City. In addition, there are cakes, pepper slices, bean curds, and mung bean cakes. There are all kinds of cakes, as well as oranges, bananas, pears, peaches, and all kinds of fruits. My mother said she was too polite. So, what does that mean? Take them out and put them on the table, ready to mix and distribute them to neighbors and nearby relatives. When Chaku saw all these things, she shouted that she wanted to eat them. When I was about to take them to her, my mother hurriedly stopped me and said, "Don't worry, baby. Grandma has prepared a lot of things for you to eat. Let's make longan soup later." This is also the rule. Then the 3 dishes came. First, they served longjing tea. Chachuchu and I each had a cup, as did the wet nurse. There were no roses in the wet nurse's cup, so she drank the cup that was left to Chaku. Then came the longan soup, which Tachu and I each had. My mother tried her best to persuade Tachu to drink more soup, so I poured my cup of soup to Chaku. Chaku drank half of it, and the wet nurse gave her some pee. The grandmother praised her and said, "This child is so good. She can pee even before she is 1 year old. I really need to make some beautiful clothes for her." I smiled and said, "Aren't her beautiful clothes enough? The whole body is covered with flowers like butterflies, and I won't be able to wear them all in a few years." My mother said, "These are all the flowers embroidered by my aunt. I can leave them to my brother to wear. It's a shame for you. And please forward this letter to her tomorrow, and you can go and see her." Before I could agree, Mother Lin had already brought her the bird's nest tea. My mother asked her to put it in front of me and said, "You should finish it quickly." I took out 2 pieces of silver in my wallet, put them in a small gold lacquer tea tray, and gave them to Mother Lin. I took it out with great gratitude. I really wanted to talk to my mother about household matters, but I didn't know where to start. She was chatting with the wet nurse at one moment, while she was busy distributing cakes and fruits, and at the same time she told Mother Lin to make snacks quickly. I sat there and didn't know what to do. It's good. I can't put my mouth or hands in. I just feel an inexplicable boredom. Several times I said to her, "Mom, please rest for a while and let's talk." But she replied disapprovingly, "You can talk at any time. I have to do my things well at the moment. Mom, if you are bored sitting here, why don't you go to each room and play with Checo? There are many newly made sachets and cocktails hanging in front of the bed in the back room. Why don't you pick the nice ones and give them to Checo? Play." The nanny was eager for this, so she carried me down to the kitchen and chatted with Mother Lin and others. Mrs. Su, the neighbor who came in behind, heard that I was back, and the servant was busy bringing in a large pot of bean paste rice dumplings with white sugar piled like hills on top. She said, "I know the eldest lady likes sweets, so there is a lot of sugar in the bean paste filling." I thanked her and rewarded her servant with 1 yuan. My mother kept saying, "It's really hard for Mrs. Su to bother. I was just asking Motherland to send some cakes," which my daughter brought back. As they talked, everyone chatted for a while. Mrs. Su asked me about teaching, and I answered vaguely because my mother-in-law was afraid that it would be too difficult for me to come and go, so I stopped teaching. My mother also lamented that it is useless for women to study. If you can study like your Miss Su, you can still serve the society. But after you get married and raise children, you may not even have time to serve the family. Mrs. Su said, "My Fengju can't do anything about it. She is 25 years old this year. It's really embarrassing to say that her husband's family is too high." The mother then asked, "How is your nephew, Mr. Yu?" "What? I heard that he is a writer." Mrs. Su shook her head and said, "It's very strange to have another person." Before she finished speaking, Motherland chose another big pot of rice dumplings. "This was from my mother's house. If you force me to eat again, you will also force Mrs. Su." At night, Chachu was clamoring to go back, crying and crying, which made me really worried. My mother took out all kinds of prepared things for her to eat and play with, but she still refused to change her mind. I frowned and said to the nanny, "Go and coax her to sleep in the back room. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Children are born bitches. The more you coax her, the worse it will be." The mother seemed to have no choice but to follow my advice. Sure enough, Chaku fell asleep soon, so everyone said, "Let's go to bed early. We are tired enough today." My mother and I slept in the same room, and Motherland made sure to join in the fun, saying that she could help take care of the little lady at night, and she would make a bed in the back room. After we got into bed, my mother still only asked about my parents-in-law's health, whether I had received any letters from Changshan recently, etc. After asking a few questions, we talked about Xingying. She said that she was really capable and helped your mother-in-law with all the housework. She was really much more useful than a daughter-in-law like you who came from a school background and couldn't do anything. I snorted and said, "What can I do? I'm just too ugly to get married, so I have to hide in the kitchen and stir up trouble." My mother heard her coughing loudly, as if she was forbidding me not to continue, for fear that Mom Walls have ears, let the news spread tomorrow. But where will the nanny actually come to listen to us? She was chatting happily with Motherland in the back room, saying how was the master in my house, how was the wife, of course the young mistress was good, and the young lady. Then the mother said, "Your young lady is really very good looking." The wet nurse also giggled and said that the young lady is really not good looking, but I heard from my wife that her mother's daughter-in-law had a very good-looking daughter-in-law. It's a pity that the young nephew passed away early, leaving her with an empty house until she grew old. Beauty often suffers from bad luck. It sounded a bit harsh to me, so I coughed loudly. They were afraid that I would be tired and asked questions, so they stopped talking. In the lonely night, on the lonely bed, my mother was also at a loss, and there was also a strange feeling, which seemed a little restrained and pretentious. I also knew that it was unnecessary, but it was still unnatural. Can't my mother be close to me anymore? Why should she be polite to me and treat me like a stranger? Maybe this was deliberately staged for the nanny. We acted as actors for a long time. But what's the point? Why do I have to please my parents-in-law? Not only me, but my mother also has to please them. It is really unlucky to give birth to a girl. It seems that I am afraid of having some bad intentions. I look at other people's colors all the time, everywhere, and in everything. Mother, you can no longer protect me, so you have to try your best to suppress your emotions in order to gain others' understanding. But I can't do this. I don't want to. My tutu is to protect her forever. If that is not possible, I hope she can take the initiative to choose a trustworthy person and live a free and affectionate life forever, only with her husband. The husband may not be like a virtuous man, but like his people.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.